Here is the walkthrough of the Cree Camp Family Light Show. This is for 2023. We'll start up here in the front. In the front here you see a P5 matrix panel. It's 2 panels wide by 6 panels tall. Our little donation box on the top. On the back of this panel, you'll see how they're all daisy chained together. The data comes all in on this side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then all those ribbon cables lead into this box on the back. In the box there is a 5-volt power supply. That is reading 5 volts, it's just weird on my phone, 5.2. And then right there is the Raspberry Pi that runs it. Also inside there is a color light card. It's inside the cabinet. It's kind of hard to see, so I can't videotape that. It's actually right there. Just barely see it. I run that at about 50% brightness, and that is the P5 matrix in the front. In the front of my show, I've got these upside down tomato cages that are wrapped in chicken wire, and they are incandescent, just red and white strings. So I guess you'd call that a super string. There are 7 of those up front. They just give that nostalgic feel to the show. I also have 8 of them back here called medium trees. That's what we call them. They're just a little bit larger tomato cages. Those are all controlled from a controller over by the tree, which I'll get to in just a second. Also in the front yard, I've got 5 PEX arches. This is just 1-inch PEX tubing from Home Depot. Inside each one of those is 66 pixels on a WS2812 5-volt pixel strip. This is the only strip that I use in my show because it's inside these arches. Each one of the arches gets a little bit of power injected to it. You can kind of see that little extra wire right there. And that's what that's for. Also in the front yard, I've got these floodlights. There's one right there. There's one right over here. It's just that 50-watt chip that you can buy on Amazon. They're really cheap. They're like $8. But the floodlight assembly, I think I bought the 4-pack originally for $80, something like that. And I took out the guts, and then I just wired the chip directly to the wire so that you see the wire coming off of that. It's just a 4-conductor wire. It's that wire right there. So I'm just driving the RGB and the ground, I guess, off each of those. And they run, there's 2 more over on this side of the yard. And they run off of this really cheap DMX controller that I got off Amazon. It's just a little, each of those are 2-channel controllers. So the one on the left does the front and the one on the back does the right. And they're just DMX controlled. Just a little, I think it's a 24-volt power supply in there, which is plenty of power to drive 4 of them. So that's the floodlights in the front of the show. The big center of the show is the Megatree. That Megatree is 200 pixels tall in 1-inch spacing. So that puts the top of the tree at just about 20 feet or so, maybe 19 feet. At the bottom, the structure is 4x4 treated lumber. And then I just bent a little piece of fence top rail that I got from Home Depot. If you kind of see it, it's kind of notched about every 8 inches or so. I don't have a pipe bender, and I'm not going to buy a $200 pipe bender just to bend one pipe. So I just notched it kind of and just bent it with my shop press. On the back, you see the structure. There are 5 guy wires that hold everything together. The pole itself is fence top rail. Actually, it's not, it's fence rail tubing. That is about 8 feet long. At the top, I welded a pulley. And then that second rail that goes up from inside, that is fence top rail, and that fits right inside very well. And then I used some 3/32 stainless braided cable Then I ran that up through the pulley and then back down the inside, and it's attached to the bottom of that second tube. Then of course, as you can see, there's a welded on bolt crank. And then I've got some come-alongs at different points just to hold it together. So coming up from the structure, what I do is I just auger in some of those augered tent stakes, or those things you buy for dog chains or whatever. I auger those in and then secure them to the end of the post. Do that on all 4 points, and then the guy wires come up. This set comes up to about at 5 feet, and this set up here is about 7 feet. And then I just use these come-alongs to keep everything straight and vertical. Then I do have one extra wire on the back here that goes all the way to the top and gives tension at the top. You can kind of see it in the sun there. At the top of the tree, you'll see a handmade C-channel electrical piece of conduit that I notched out and then bent in roughly a half shape. And then I welded on some support structure, as you can see there. Welded it onto a piece of that fence post. And of course, that fence top tubing fits right up inside it, as you can see right there. It's pretty well balanced. Most of it is front heavy. It's trying to pull front. That's why the extra line is there. And at the very top, we've got a Gilbert Engineering Bethlehem star. I believe that's something like 170 pixels, something like that. I'm not sure. The mega tree structure itself is Boscoil strip. And the way I wired it, thankfully X-Lights lets you do that with custom models. As I go up on the odd, actually even, I go up 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, all the way up to the top to 200. And then I come back down the odds so that each string itself is separate. And then I wire the pair of strings up. So that string's 200, down 400, then back over here 600 and 800. So those two strings are together. And those two, you can see the white wire there this is the power injection for this string. This is the power injection for this string. And here's your data coming from the controller. So that's how I've got them. I've got them wired in pairs. Makes it real easy. They don't have to be in this particular location. And I just crank down the boat crank and bring it down and drop it into some bins, and that's my mega tree. The mega tree controller box is right here. First off, on the side, you can see all the injection wires coming out the side. Those are just injection of power and ground. There's 24 of them, one for each string. And then on the right-hand side is a little cover where all the wires go into the box. Inside the box, pretty simple. You got 3 5-volt power supplies, a Culp K32 board with plenty of room for expansion. And then underneath there, it's kind of hard to see, but I have some bus bars underneath there, and that's what distributes all the power out to each of those plugs on the side for the power injection. My favorite little monoprice gigabit switch right there, runs on 5 volts, just plug it right into the power supply, don't need the extra dongle, which is pretty nice. And then right here on the side, coming off the Culp board, this white and red wire here comes right off the board. It generates DMX natively, and that allows me to run it into this red wire here, which goes off to run the floodlights in the front for the DMX, which I just moved and they were flipping around. Okay. So that's my front yard. Oh, lastly, I do make a spreadsheet as to where everything is on my display and what the channel counts are, so I know where to plug everything in. And that's right there in the inside of the top of the box. The next level of my show are what we call the tree trunk matrices. That is also a Boscoil set, Boscoil strips. That is 200 pixels up, I believe, at 2-inch spacing. Might be 150, I'm not sure now. And it's 16 strings across. And again, 2-inch spacing, so it's not quite twice the size of the Megatree, so that makes me think it's 150. So I think it's 150 pixels up and then 150 pixels back down. And that's how I have it wired. Comes in on string number 1, goes all the way to the top, comes back down on string number 2, then goes string 3, goes up, comes back down string number 4. So again, they're in pairs. On the back of this, you can see the power injection points. It's really nice the pixels that I bought have these points kind of wired into them. So I just bring a 4-conductor wire up, 2 power, 2 ground, jump in for both power and ground at this point for both strips. So I get a nice power injection here. And then I go up about another 6-8 feet, and there's another injection point right there, and so on and so forth. Here's an injection point that I didn't use, for example, just kind of hanging off that string. But you can see here's the power injection wires here, here's the power injection wires for that too, here's the ones for that too, and so on and so forth. I hang it on the tree with just some C-channel. Then I bought some aluminum U-channel that I put some bolts on. You can see the bolts right there. And then that holds each of the strings at the perfect spacing across. And then I can adjust this U-channel within the inside of the C-channel and slide it left and right or whatever I have to do. And there's 2 of those intermediate struts. Of course, there's one right there. There's another one right there. And of course, they're hanging just from the top. So at the very top, it's the exact same thing. It's just, you know, the C strut, or the C, that C strut for that aluminum, electronic C strut. And then all the 16 strings hang from up there. Also at the top, you'll see some conduit that I bent to look kind of like palm fronds. Here in Arizona, we don't have trees, we have palm trees. So I just decided to hang some incandescents up there. Those are just icicle lights, and they're in red, green, blue, white, violet, and orange. So there's 6 different lights up there. And then of course, however you fire them is whatever color fires. Also at the very top right there, you can see that little tiny box. That's a little floodlight as well, just to give a little extra, little shining up into the actual palm canopy. So that is my Washington palm left. And I have the exact same thing over on this side. Same configuration on the right side of the show. That's the Washington palm right. All right, here is the controller box at the right palm tree. This is on the right side of the display. Inside here, we've got a K16B from Culp. Love their boards. There you can see the distribution bars at the bottom here for both power and ground. Then they run out to the Reiwu dongles that run out the distribution of power to the matrice. 3 5-volt 70 amp power supplies right there, each with the custom printed little covers for the LED voltage meters. Another monoprice 5-volt gigabit switch, 8-port switch. Over on this section, I've got 4, actually it looks like 3 of my incandescent boards. These boards were made by Robert Martin. There it is, Robert Martin, way back in 2009. So these are DMX controlled. They're 16 channels. And as you can see, you've got the wires just plugged directly into them for all the different things that I do. This first set of wires here, I believe, is for the incandescent on the side of the house. And if you'll notice, I've only got the power output of them for this group. So for 4 circuits, I'm running 5 wires. So there is a common ground. I flipped over the board on the back, noticed that the traces are called common ground, so I figured why not wire them that way. So I get 4 circuits off of a 5-wire. This is thermostat wire. Nice, cheap, inexpensive wire. Also inside this box is this little thing called the Rainbow Brain. That is what controls the floodlights in the front. It's a little something I bought way back in like 2008 or 2007. One of the first things I bought for my show. It's just a little 12-volt thing, and then they work with these special floodlights, which I'll get to. That is pretty much it for this box. Again, rain hood on the side just to keep the rain out. Worked great this year, even in the rain. The next layer of the show, I've got these 4 columns in the front of my house, and I built these matrices that are C9 incandescents in both red and white, and then also it has pixels in it. So if we move close to one, I can show you kind of what I did. I just took a Boscoyo strip, and I did pixel, white, pixel, red, pixel, white, pixel, red, all the way up and down these lines. Of course, interjecting power when needed. And each section of red and white are about 1 foot tall. So this first section down here, red and white, is section 1, and then it's 2, 3, 4, and so on, all the way to 8. So there's 8 sections of red and white in the C9s for each of the 4 columns. And then, of course, it also has the pixels. I think it's 198 or something like that pixels. So inside this box over here is where the electronics are for this one. And there you can see those 4 boxes. Or excuse me, the 4 controllers. All right, here's how I wire them. If you notice, that is an AC board that is putting 110 volts out on each of the ports. And I wire that right into a Cat 5 jack. Then from there, I just run 4 Cat wires out, and that one goes to way over, it looks like shooter right. And then the second one's for left, last 2 are for the middles. So as you notice, that's high voltage power, 110 AC, going over Cat wire. Because each section of wire, I think each section is only 18 C9s, which is less than an amp. So because of each circuit being less than an amp, that 22 or 24 gauge Cat 5 wire works just fine. So that's how those are all wired. And then right there, we've got a little K8, little run by a Beagle Bone, but that's a cult board as well. And then a 70 amp 5 volt power supply with power distribution there on the side on the bus bar. Power distribution comes out the side here, of course, and that runs the injection points on those 4 matrices as well. My whole show is 5 volts, so I run all my pixels at 5 volts and inject power about every 50 pixels to have a nice solid color rendition. Here's another set of floodlights that I kind of Frankensteined. I bought this pair of floodlights here. There's one right there, and then there's one over there. And those shine up on my front wall here. And inside, you can kind of see what I did. I did kind of the same thing as the front. I pulled the power supplies out of each of the floodlights. Used the little remote control there to turn them on to full white. So that stays inside there. So now those are outputting full power. And then they go into that one little DMX board right there with the little red flashing light on it. And that's a 2-channel board, and that runs them off DMX. So I bought an infrared. You can see little red infrared sensors here that aren't used. So those are infrared, a little cheaper that way. And then wire them to a $10 DMX control board. They work great. Here are some of the 3D printed props that I made over the years. This is a little 5-spoke star. Each of those arms has 20 pixels on it, so that's 100 pixels on this prop. That was found on Thingiverse. It was just a really simple thing. Each of those arms print in about 3-4 hours. So I think this prop took me just a couple days to build, print-wise. And then it daisy chains over to a second one that's over here on this window. And those are some of the 3D things that I do for the show. And some more 3D printed props here. Those are little snowflakes, again, that are 3D printed from Thingiverse. And each one holds 25 pixels. And I put them together on this pole. And then I 3D printed this attachment point. It just wraps around the pole and then puts the little PVC conduit out to the side. And then I wire them through these little tiny little plugs. Those aren't Raywu or X-Connect or anything like that. Those are just found on Amazon. Really low, really small gauge wire on them, so they don't handle a lot of power. But what that allows me to do, oh, by the way, there's 12 of them. So they go from the bottom here and kind of swoop up and then swoop over and then go all the way to the top on this dead palm tree. And then for Halloween, I can just pull each of those arms off, disconnect the little connector, and then I've got 3D printed spiders that go into place. So for Christmas, this is my snowflake array, I call it, and for Halloween, it's called the spider array. And it gives nice motion, that sweeping motion back and forth. It's really nice. I like to try to add motion with the lights. So that's that. Here's one of our first custom-made snowflakes. I just grabbed some extra, I think that was from a pop-up that blew away in the wind and most everything bent up, but there was some pieces left of it. So I took the pieces of the pop-up and built it into a snowflake. And then thank you to X-Lights has the custom models. I can just run all the pixels, any orientation that I want. I come in the middle and I inject power there, just I think at one point. It has 130 pixels on it. And that's just a nice little unique thing to our show. Right there's one of the outdoor speakers. The other one is over on the other side. Kind of hard to see through the palm tree. That just allows the show to play while people are walking around. We live in Arizona, live on the end of a cul-de-sac. So when people come walking around, they can just walk up and listen to the show. Don't have to be in your car, although we do broadcast in the car as well. Inside this controller box here for the front, you got a K8 right there as well. That runs most of the pixels on the front of the house. It also runs the verts and things and runs the snowflake array. There's the power injection bar. Underneath there, the little silver thing is the FM transmitter. The little black thing is the amplifier that runs the 2 outdoor speakers. And the very bottom is just some power supplies. Over on this side, we got some more 5-volt power supplies. Those are 70 amps, and they're all connected to these Anderson plugs here out the side. So we got the thick gauge wire coming off each of those power supplies. They're all connected together with their neutrals. And so I've got a lot of power. I've got 210 amps coming out through these 3 plugs. And that's about what it takes to run this matrix. This matrix is 7 wide by 8 tall. So that's 56 panels of P5. The way I build my matrix is I go and get some 1/2 by 1 inch little tiny furring strip basically. And I build one frame, then I build another one behind it, exact same size. And then on the back of the panel, you'll see some silver, those silver plates, and that silver structure right there. Those can be bought at Home Depot. They're right by the strapping area. And that strap, I just drill the holes to correspond with the hole pattern on the back of the P5 boards. So I've got strapping that supports the P5 all the way through this joint, all the way to the top. And then right there again for the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, and so on. So I've got strapping supporting this all the way up. And then I let it run a little long, and then I sandwich it between the front and the back frames. So if we look kind of closely, you can see the 2 frames there. And then if we look like down over on this end, you can probably see the strapping inside there. So the nice thing about this panel being, 7 wide by 8 tall, is I can carry it. It's not that heavy. It's probably 50 pounds, maybe 55 pounds. I can carry it myself. So you got all these power wires coming in and then a signal wire. Signal wire, of course, goes into the color light board right there. And the color light is being driven off of a Raspberry Pi right there on the top. Here's the gigabit switch running off the Pi 4 there, off one of the USB 3 outputs. The little one at the bottom down there is an older Pi, and that's what runs the show. It's a Pi 3B. And that's got all the show data on it, and that's the master. That runs the entire show. All the other components, of course, are slaves. So the Beagle Bone in there is just a remote location to that master. There's my lineup of how things are all connected. Orange is for Halloween, green is for Christmas. Kind of helps me keep everything straight with all my different channel counts and things like that. So that's a little bit about the front of the house. Distribution of power. Underneath this eave, I'm at the front of the house by the matrix. Underneath this eave, I wired in a sub panel. I don't know if you can really see it on this picture, but those are double 15 amp breakers. So I literally have 8 circuits in there, and you can kind of see I had to customize the box, so to speak. Probably not truly to code, but honestly, it's worked for 12 years, so why break it if it ain't broke, right? So coming in on this side, I've got some 6 gauge wire that I had left over from when I wired my spa. That's the 2 white wires. And then I've got some THHN, that's just I think 16 gauge or something like that, maybe 14 or 12 gauge, I'm not sure. And I got 3 of those. So those act as the neutral / ground. And then the 2 white wires are the 2 legs that I'm running into the panel. And they run through those Anderson plugs there so I can disconnect them. And then right there, of course, is the box. And that box stays there 24/7, 365. I don't move that box. Coming out of those boxes are the Romex wires there that go up underneath the eave. And they go to these little spots right there where I have some breakout boxes installed. Then I bent the little tabs off the duplex receptacle to allow 15 amps for each output. So there's 4 15 amp outputs there, and then go down a little bit farther is a second box. Right there is another 4 15-amp circuits. And then I just pull down some extension cords down behind the matrix, for example, drop them out the bottom, run them across the ground, and they go off to all the circuits. So that's how I do power. Majority of the show is run off that. I think I've got 2 other places where I also pull power. That main power comes around from the side of the house, and it's a temporary location. You can see that white wire right there. That's just temporarily run across the house. Runs underneath that eave over there. And then it comes and drops around over by my sub panel. See the white wire that comes down. And then I just drop it in on the inside in there, pull it through a wire grommet, and then run it into a double 80-amp breaker. That's what runs the show. This side of my house over my garage, got some custom-made snowflakes up there. That's about 6 feet high by 6 feet wide. I think that one has 390 pixels on it, pretty sure, something like that. And that's all just some metal I bought from Home Depot, painted white, then zip tied on some pixels. Works really well. 2 wires at the bottom. The white wire is power injection, the other one's data. So I got 2 of those right there. They're both basically about the same. Then in the middle, I have this thing called a multi-face. And if you look on it, you can kind of use your imagination. You can see a Santa beard, you can see a elf collar, you can see some wisps of hair for a female singer. You got all the different mouth movements, and then you got a mustache. You got 2 different ears on it. You got the round ears or the pointy ears. At the top there, you got a snowflake brow or a top hat. And at the very, very top, if I just fire that circle at the top, it looks like a little halo. So basically, I can have Celine Dion singing Oh Holy Night and put a little halo above her head. I can have a narrator talk with either a top hat or a stocking cap. Of course, run different effects across that. And then at the bottom, the collar can either be shoulders if you want, or an elf collar. And then different ears that you can do, whatever you want to do there. You got eyebrows and eyelids. So that's about 500 pixels that we customized. Just put all those different images together in a paint program and then put it on my projector and projected it onto that board, and then just cut a whole bunch of holes and wired it in however I wanted to wire it, wherever the pixels would go. And then with custom modeling on X-Lights, I was able to make each section what I need it to be. Right eye, left eye, eyelids, nose, mouth movements, mustache, head, different hats, so on and so forth. So that's a neat little show thing that we've had for the last 10, 12 years, something like that. If I'd do it again, probably would, because it is different. It's not just a matrix with a picture on it, because I've got that in the show as well, and that's coming up next. On the second story of my house, I've got these windows at the top. Looks a little weird because of the sun out there, but that is a panel. You can kind of see at the bottom those straps that hold the panels together, like I was talking about before. That is a P5 panel in there. They're run vertically instead of horizontally. So they're 7 wide by 4 tall. And that allows me to fit the dimension of that window close enough so that it basically encompasses the whole window. And on that window is what I run all the different images, like the singing bulbs or the singing ornaments or whatever, or singing faces. That's what I can do on that window. And I've got another window just like it over there with the exact same thing. 7 wide by 4 tall, so it's 28 P5 panels in there as well. Also, I have another one of those mega snowflakes. This one I think has about 420 pixels on it, something like that. And that's custom made as well, 6 foot tall by about 6 feet wide. And I added density to that this year. I put new pixels on it and added pixels. It only had about 200 pixels on it last year. And it made a big difference on the show this year. It was really nice addition. Also, you can see kind of over on the side there, you can see a Bethlehem star. That's 2 10-foot sections of fence post topper that I have secured over on that side of my roof. And then up at the top there is a custom welded snowflake, or Bethlehem star, I mean. And that is, I think, about 140 pixels. And they're just zip tied on. They're the flat square pixels, zip tied on there. And that just gives some light up above the house. It really does look like a star shining in the night. Really neat effect. All throughout my display, I've got these things that we call verts. Just little pieces of an old mega tree that I had left over on some PVC pipe. You can see them kind of going vertically in the corner there, that green thing. And they just add dimension to the house. Here's a set way up in front. Got some up there as well. And then the main feature of the house is this thing that we called an eave board. I'll walk around the front just a little bit here to get a better picture of it. And each one of these boards, I just went to Home Depot and I had them take a 4x8 sheet of some pressed laminate sort of wood and slice it into 4-inch pieces. So mostly these pieces are about 8 feet long, mostly. And then right at the point where the two pieces meet, I wired in some Molex plugs. And that allows me to disconnect all the different sections and bring them down as an 8-foot section each. And as you can see on those boards, I've got a bunch of different props. I've got the C7 incandescent right next to a C9 faceted bulb, that's a pixel. Then I got the square little flat pixel right next to it. So that way with 2 lines of pixels, I can do 2 different effects going across as a wash. Down below there in the icicles, you can see the green ones, that's a warm white icicle. And then I've got some blue and some ice white icicles as well. And then lastly are those blinder lights that are there. Those are 110. Those fire off one of those Robert boards, whatever they are, SSR boards. Robert Martin, that's it. And that's a little bit about my eave boards. Nice thing about the eave boards is I can disconnect the Molex plug, bring my drill up there, 2 screws, pop it out, hand it down to my daughter, she brings it in the house. I can have all the lights on this house down in about 2 hours. So it makes it kind of nice. Here's a little bit about the other side of the house. There you can see that pole going up for the Bethlehem Star. Right next to it is another custom snowflake. That's about 4 feet by 4 feet. You see another controller box there, right at its base. And then over on that side of the house, 2 more custom snowflakes. Kind of hard to see from this angle, but can be seen from the street. And that just kind of finishes out the overall display of the house. And here's a picture of what those matrices look like from the back. There's 2 5-volt power supplies down there feeding up into the distribution area for each of the power for the panels. You can see that strapping there. And again, I run it long and leave the tabs hang off, so it gives me anchor points that I can anchor it into the window. So I just find out where the hole is going to be for the panel, and then I cut the hole in the strapping and put in little tiny screws with washers to hold it all together. There's your distribution bar, one of the 4 that run power to the entire panel. That actually is a Pi 3B running this panel. Doesn't seem to have a problem running off of that USB 2.0 into the gigabit dongle leading up to the color light board. Doesn't seem to have too much of a problem with this size matrix, but I did have to go to the Pi 4 for the 56 panel matrix down below. And the other matrix is over on this side of the room. You can kind of see it there. Not going to pull the drapes back. Actually, I will. It's the exact same thing on this side. There's the matrix on this window. Again, the straps, the distribution of power. There's the color light board. There's the window to the front yard. Kind of gives an overall impression. This was fun to configure because the panels again are rotated on a vertical axis instead of horizontal. A little bit more difficult to do it, but using the color light program and using X-Lights was able to model it properly. Gives nice definition in this window. So those are the window P5 matrices.